Stay right there a minute. I'm going to embarrass you. You know, I try, many of our staff, especially our music staff, have real jobs, like outside of here on Sunday morning, real jobs. And if you did not read Jonathan's op-ed in Friday's paper, I encourage you to find it. I was so proud of him this week. Some of you obviously did read it. Jonathan works in public health, primarily doing HIV and AIDS prevention work for Kansas City Care Clinic. And it sounds condescending, and I don't mean it that way, but I was so proud of him and so proud of us for the work that he does for our city and for public health. And I encourage you to go read that, and that's going to make a little more sense by the time I get done with my sermon about how the church can be leading the way in birthing new things and new chapters in our world. And you are doing that, my friend, and I am grateful for you. So. I about got teary just saying that, so. But it's hard to get teary when you're preaching Jeremiah. That's not true. It's easy to get teary preaching Jeremiah because it's awful. And I'm glad that this horrible sermon series of the Old Testament prophets is over after this week. I don't know whose idea this was to preach all this, but we'll blame it on Reverend Motter because he's not here. Most folks are pretty unfamiliar with the prophet Jeremiah, not the bullfrog, okay? We're not talking about the bullfrog who was a good friend of mine. We're talking about this Old Testament prophet who sent a letter to the people who were in exile from Jerusalem. But if you know anything, you probably know the one line that John read, "I know the plan I have for you, declares the Lord." You've probably been given a card with it on it, or you have some little kitschy plaque or plate or something with it on. And we have it in our homes or in our offices or in our churches. And yet when we read it in context of the rest of chapter 29, it's really not that great, y'all. And I've been wondering how we can relate this ancient letter from the prophet Jeremiah to us here in Kansas City at the end of the liturgical year. As David said, Advent begins next week, and we move into a new Christian church year. These people to whom Jeremiah was writing, they had been taken from their homeland. They'd been deported to a place that was completely unknown to them. Their world had completely changed around them. They found themselves in a situation they did not choose, and yet had to figure out how to live in a way into this new reality in the very best possible way they could. And they get this letter from this guy from back home. And I imagine if I were hearing this letter, this letter had come from home, and I was going to be so excited to hear what it said until somebody actually read it. Because the hearers must have been listening for a little something that would be hopeful and positive. And this letter basically says, bad news, my friends. It would seem that the people who had been deported and living in this strange place would want someone to say, stand up, resist, fight back, or at least somebody to say, hold on. This situation is temporary. Jeremiah doesn't say any of that. Jeremiah says this situation is not temporary unless you consider more than 70 years to be temporary. Jeremiah says, so you better make the best of this. So go out with these people who've taken you into this situation that you did not choose. Now build a nice house and have some babies and grow some veggies, because there's no quick fix. This situation was years in the making, and you're not just going to flip a switch and make it all go away. And Jeremiah goes on to say, I know that there are these other folks out there telling you that there is some easy answer. There are other prophets, Jeremiah says, who are preaching other things. And Jeremiah says, oh, don't pay attention to those guys, y'all. The snake oil salesmen. They're going to lead you down a bad road that's going to make the situation worse for you. So be careful now, Jeremiah says. He says you need to be faithful, good and faithful citizens in this situation which you did not choose. You need to be good and faithful. And oh, by the way, you need to pray for these horrible people. Thanks for that. Yes, Jeremiah says you need to pray for them, these hated enemies. Pray for their success because your future depends on it. And then we get to this little line that many of us know, where God declares, I know the plan I have for you, plans for a future of hope, but not today. Nerd moment. Here's what I learned this week. When we read that, we have to make sure that we don't read it as you, Scott, or you, Amy, or you, Tyrone. It's, as they would say in Texas, y'all. This is the corporate you. This is all y'all, God says. I know the plans I have for all of y'all. Well, I don't think that makes it any better. And where's the good news in that? Except maybe that we're not in it by ourselves. That seems to be good news, all y'all. And I guess if there is any good news in this part of the letter from Jeremiah, it is that there is this promise of change and something better. This message to the gentle people of God out on the margins, out of power, and yet called to be faithful until such a time as they can be gathered up and brought home to safety. Jeremiah promises that there will be a day of reckoning and wholeness coming. Yes, indeed. It seems the ancient people of God that we find here in this letter from Jeremiah were at a tremendous crossroads. They could live into the culture or stand in direct opposition to it. They had to choose which preachers they were going to listen to. They had to make a choice about their faith and how they would live it out in the world. And Jeremiah says, you have to be faithful to God. Even in the midst of all of this, be faithful to God and God's ways alone. Now, I don't know about all y'all, but when I look at it that way, Jeremiah seems more relevant than I thought. Jeremiah is saying a hopeful future is coming and there will be a day of reckoning. I have to tell you, if I hear one more time on the news this week that there is this cultural shift happening and this awakening of something or another, I'm going to throw something at my television. I have held off, to some of your dismay and surprise. That's a you, all y'all. Surprise that I've said nothing publicly about the media frenzy around the most recent shock and surprise of the widespread nature of sexual harassment and women's equality, also known as men behaving badly. But now with this week, with men in both political parties coming under fire, it feels less partisan to me. It bothered me at first that I didn't have this tremendous sense of shock and outrage like many of my friends did who were posting things and saying things and carrying on, and I couldn't figure out why I was not surprised until I realized the only shock I have is that so many people are shocked. Now, maybe, now I'm not going to dwell on this because if you're new here, I shouldn't have to dwell on this. If you're old here, I shouldn't have to dwell on this. But maybe because I've spent my life in the swamp of the old boys club, first in the world of college athletics and then in the world of ministry, dominated by male clergy, it feels a little bit like we've been, this week, women, or the last few weeks, women have been as if we had said to our African American brothers and sisters, hey, y'all, racism still exists. Even though we had an African American president. No kidding. Or to our LGBTQIA friends, hey, y'all, homophobia still exists, even though we made marriage equality happen. No kidding. Welcome to my world. And so I'm wondering this week where the church stands and how the church is going to be a part of, if as the talking heads keep saying, this shift in cultural awakening. Well, I decided last night that using the word church was probably not the best idea, because there's a lot of baggage around that, especially if you've got on the television. So I'm going to use people of God. Because as the old Sunday school song goes, right? I can't even do it. Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, see all the people, right? This building is not the church. All y'all are the church. At least that's what I learned in my little country church growing up. So where will the people of God stand on this? It seems to me that the people of God have a couple of choices. Just like the ancient peoples did, they have some options. And one option is to say that women continue to be second-class citizens. Now that seems weird to say in this church, because all y'all hired a female senior minister. And so you'd say, oh, we wouldn't consider that. However, more than half the world's Christians affirm women as second-class citizens. They wouldn't say that. That's me saying that. In that saying that women don't have the same rights as men, at least in the church. So if the vast majority of the world's Christians don't affirm the full inclusion of women into the life of the church, how should we expect them to do it on the outside of the church? And so I said I was not going to dwell on this, and I'm not going to. And I'll tell you why. Because what has been happening recently has filled me with so much hope. I know a lot of my friends have been, oh, the sky is falling, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. But I'm going to walk on the side of Jeremiah, who said there is a future filled with hope. Because these are genies you can't put back in a bottle. I just now thought about genies, and anyway, we're not going to go there. Never mind. Forget I said that. They're filling me with so much hope. At first I thought, oh, this feels like Easter. Old ways passing away and dying. Old ways, as Jeremiah says, of exile and oppression that will lead to a future filled with hope. And yet on this Sunday of Thanksgiving, when next Sunday we'll have Advent out and ready, this also feels a whole lot like Advent and Christmas to me. I'm not going to throw my shoe and break my television because maybe they're right, the talking heads on television, that something new is being birthed. The birth of something new, the birth of something different. And my friends, when we remember that at Christmas time, we put out, in the infamous words of Ricky Bobby, little 6-pound, 7-ounce baby Jesus. When we put out baby Jesus, We proclaim the good news that the vulnerable and the humble will and can stand toe to toe with power and not back down. That's the story of 6-pound, 7-ounce baby Jesus lying in a manger. And as we are entering this season of birthing something new, someone said to me recently, well, it's easier when you have a female senior minister. That makes you different. That gives you a unique opportunity to say to a culture in a time of transition, this, all y'all, is different. This is just one example. This is just one example of how we are different from lots of others, of Jeremiah's other prophets. That, wherever he went with the purple hair, is how we are saying yes to inclusion and equality, to saying yes to being a place of forward thinking. And I wrote that, and then I was having my sit. And I remembered the conversation I had with a Roman Catholic sister many years ago. Roman Catholic sisters always get me in trouble. We were having a conversation, and I said something about female clergy and churches with female clergy, and this Roman Catholic sister looked across her glass of wine at me and said, yes, you do have a unique opportunity, you who, ordain female clergy and do those kinds of things. She says, if only you would take your opportunity a little more seriously. I sat up straight in my chair. And she said, yes, because too many times you are patting yourselves on the back and forgetting your deep responsibility to help bring the rest of us along with you. Helping the rest of us birth equality and justice and inclusion. She said, it can't be enough for you to say, yay, us, what an opportunity we have to do something different. So take your responsibility a little more seriously. I'm telling you, those sisters, they get me every daggum time. Right, Myra Christopher? They get us in trouble. And so I've been thinking about that. That if the culture is in labor, birthing a new way, who is going to help the culture birth it? Are we going to leave it to celebrities of all sorts and TV reality stars and female journalists or will we as the people of God take our responsibility seriously to helping birth something new at Christmas time? So as we get ready to move into the Advent Christmas season, I'm going to start thinking about us as midwives. Midwives, because as my Roman Catholic sister friend says, female clergy, especially one with 2 small children, ought to know something about birthing something new. And maybe you can help do it better than others. So annoying, these Catholic sisters. And so in this season of Advent, perhaps you have friends who are in need of some good news. Perhaps you have friends who need to know that there are people of God birthing something new this Christmas. I believe this. I believe deep in my bones that this is what the old words from Jeremiah are saying to us. I know, says God, the plans I have for all of y'all. That we are being called in this time to help birth this whatever that is coming, that is desperately trying to be born. One might say I have really been feeling the Braxton Hicks labor pains over the last several weeks to get me to this place. Something is trying to be born, says the talking heads. I just hope the church will take her responsibility seriously into helping it come into the world in a healthy and safe way. I never really took very seriously these words from Jeremiah before. I know the plans I have for y'all. And I certainly didn't realize that they would call me to help us become midwives. But that is my prayer for us this Christmas. May it be so. May it be so for us. Amen.